That's chance and luck are hard to separate from hard work, actually. So luck favours the prepared mind, I suppose, is what you'd say. It's always lucky to come across a system, an experimental system, which actually gives you an answer, because there's so many of them where you can't generate enough pertinent data to allow you to draw conclusions. So I'm going back a long way here, but my own PhD work was around how plants pack protein into seeds. The first experimental system I started working with was soybeans, well studied, and it's a major crop in the US. We got about a year in, and the work that I was doing essentially got gazumped by a group in the US who did a very good job, I might add. But then I moved to a more Australian crop. In Australia, lupins are grown for stock feed, and that opened a door to a whole lot of stuff, because lupins process proteins in quite a different way to more widely used legumes for human consumption. So why did I pick lupins? It was an Australian crop. It wasn't because we knew that there was going to be something exciting about it, but it turned out to be really interesting. So it was lucky that we picked them, but it wouldn't have been lucky unless we'd been looking for those kind of characteristics, I guess.
There is a really quite telling example of that in my own research, where I, for many years, studied the ecology and behaviour of birds. And then in 1995, my study site burnt down, and I lost all my colour-marked birds, which I've been looking at for about 7 years, and that study was abruptly stopped. But in the process, I was confronted by the fact that this was a prescribed burn that had escaped, that burnt my study site, and that started me on a whole trajectory for the last decade of studying fire ecology, which I hadn't been particularly interested in, but I was confronted with. And I'd have to say, looking back now, that's probably the area in which I've made the greatest contribution in my science. So call that serendipity. I got burnt, but it's benefited my work.
Chance is actually the reason I'm in forensics. I was originally working in evolutionary genetics, working on parakeet evolution, and by chance there was a flood in New Zealand and a skull washed up. And New Zealand police had no idea how to analyse it or how to find out who it was, and they happened to come to the university that I was working at because they knew we had techniques to analyse minute amounts of DNA. And so I spent some time finding out the ancestry of the skull, whether it was a Maori individual or a European. And that was my first exposure to human genetics and to forensic science at all. And that really got my interest up. Wow, this is amazing that we can use DNA to identify who a person is, where they're from. The fact we could trace the skull back to a Nantucket whaler from the 1800s just made me think the science is amazing, and I'm going to go and do this for the rest of my career. And it was purely chance that New Zealand police didn't know where else to turn. So that has influenced the rest of my life, basically.